spills a single drop of coffee on the counter, and before she even reaches for a paper towel, the word is already out of her mouth. Sorry, not to anyone in particular. There is no one else in the kitchen. The sink doesn't need an apology. The counter doesn't care. But the word comes anyway, automatic, worn smooth from thousands of repetitions. Like a nervous tick dressed up as politeness. This is the person who apologizes for everything, and if you have ever shared a room with one, you already know the sound of it. That's soft, reflexive sorry that arrives before the sentence even finishes forming. Sometimes before anything has actually gone wrong at all. It shows up in the smallest places first. Someone bumps into them on a crowded street, and they are the one who says sorry, even though the fault was never theirs. They asked a question in a meeting and preface it with an apology, as if curiosity itself were an imposition. They cancel a plan due to illness and apologize 3 separate times in the same text message. Once for the cancellation, once for the timing, and once, somehow, for having to say sorry at all. It is not politeness in the ordinary sense. Politeness has an off switch. This does not. This is something closer to a reflex wired into the nervous system. A constant, low hum of anticipatory guilt that never fully turns off. Because somewhere along the way, this person learned that their presence itself required justification. To understand where this comes from, you have to go back further than the apology itself. Back to the environment that taught the nervous system this was the safest way to exist. In many cases, it starts in a household where emotional weather changed without warning. A parent whose mood could shift from calm to explosive in the space of a slammed door. A caregiver who used silence as punishment. Who can make a room feel 3 degrees colder just by refusing to speak? In houses like this, children learn to read faces before they learn to read words. They become fluent in the tiny signals that precede an outburst, the tightening jaw, the sharper tone, the sigh that means something is coming. And because they cannot control the adult's mood, they learn to control the one thing they can. Themselves. They shrink. They soften. They apologize preemptively. Because if you say sorry before the storm arrives, sometimes, just sometimes, the storm passes you by. This becomes the blueprint. Not a decision, not something chosen consciously, but a survival strategy laid down so early and so consistently that it hardens into personality. The nervous system concludes quietly and permanently that taking up space is dangerous, that having needs is dangerous, that being seen too clearly might invite the very anger it was designed to avoid. So the child grows into an adult who has mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight, someone who can fill a room without ever seeming to occupy it, who can be liked by nearly everyone and known intimately by almost no one, because knowing them would require them to stop apologizing long enough to actually say what they think. Watch how this plays out in adult relationships, and the pattern becomes almost mathematical in its consistency. A partner raises a minor complaint, something small, forgetting to buy milk, running 15 minutes late, and the apologizer's response is disproportionate every time. Not just sorry, but a small cascade of self-flagellation and over-explanation. A promise to do better. An anxious scanning of the partner's face for any lingering sign of displeasure. The apology is rarely about the milk. It is about an old, buried fear that any mistake, however small, is proof of some deeper unworthiness that unless the debt is paid immediately and visibly, the relationship itself is at risk. This is where the apology stops being kindness and starts becoming a kind of quiet erosion. Because a relationship needs friction to be honest. It needs the freedom to disagree, to say no, to sit in a moment of tension without immediately trying to smooth it over. The person who apologizes for everything cannot tolerate that tension. It feels, to their nervous system, like danger, not discomfort, but actual threat. So, they rush to end it, and in doing so, they slowly erase their own opinions from the relationship. Over years, a partner may realize they have no real idea what this person actually wants for dinner, for a vacation, for their own life. Because every preference has been pre-apologized into vagueness. I don't mind, whatever works. Sorry, it's not a big deal. The apologizer becomes a mirror instead of a person, reflecting back whatever keeps the peace, and slowly losing track of what they would have chosen if peace had never been the priority. There is a particular cruelty in how invisible this exhaustion is to everyone, except the person living it. From the outside, this looks like humility, even virtue. Friends describe them as easygoing, low maintenance, endlessly considerate. Co-workers say they are a pleasure to work with, always flexible, never difficult. And there is a real temptation in a culture that prizes agreeableness to read all of this as simply good character. But underneath the easy surface is a person running a constant, unpaid internal audit, silently checking whether they have overstepped, whether they have taken up too much room, whether their existence today has cost anyone anything. It is exhausting in a way that rarely shows on the outside, because showing exhaustion would itself require an apology. The tragedy is that this pattern often achieves the opposite of what it was built to protect. The apologizer believes, somewhere below conscious thought, that constant deference will make them safe from rejection, that if they never cause friction, they will never be abandoned. But people, over time, do not fall in love with the mirror. They fall in love with edges, with opinions, with the specific texture of another person's wants and refusals. A partner or friend who is never allowed to see disagreement eventually starts to feel a strange, hollow loneliness in the relationship, a sense that they are close to someone who is always present but never quite there. The very strategy designed to prevent abandonment can end up manufacturing a quieter, more insidious version of it, abandonment by omission, where the apologizer is technically in the room but has never risked being fully known in it. Recovery from this pattern rarely comes from simply deciding to stop apologizing. Willpower is not the mechanism, because the apology was never really a choice to begin with. It was a nervous system doing its job, protecting a child who needed protecting. Real change tends to start much smaller, in the space of a single held breath. It starts the first time this person feels the urge to say sorry rise in their throat, and instead of speaking, they pause. They let the silence sit for one uncomfortable second longer than instinct wants. They notice that the room does not collapse, that the other person does not leave. That disagreement, small and survivable, does not summon the storm it once did in childhood. Each of these tiny pauses is a quiet renegotiation with an old fear. Proof, accumulated one interaction at a time. That safety no longer depends on disappearing. What ultimately shifts is not the frequency of the word sorry, but the meaning underneath it. Somewhere in that slow, uneven process, the apology stops being a plea for permission to exist and becomes, if it survives at all, an actual acknowledgement of an actual mistake. The coffee spill on the counter stops requiring words at all. It becomes simply a paper towel and a wiped surface. No audience required, no forgiveness necessary. Because for the first time, existing without apology no longer feels like the most dangerous thing in the room.